we're going to talk about today is arthrokinematics. When we looked at the whole flow chart of kinesiology, if you remember from the very first lecture, we identified that there was a subcategory called osteokinematics, and that's our joint movements like abduction, flexion, internal rotation, external rotation. And then there's this other category called arthrokinematics. Arthrokinematics, if we look at the root word, arthro means joint, so it's actually what's happening inside the joint. And there are two different things that we're going to look at from an arthrokinematic perspective. And the first one is called the convex, concave law. The next one that we're going to learn and talk about are these inside joint movements called slide, spin, and roll. So when a joint moves, or when joint movement happens, we have these arthrokinematic components happening. So let's move to the slide, spin, and roll first because it's the easiest to understand, and then we'll head to the convex concave law. Okay, so when you have different types of forces, when you have two different joints, you have two different articulations happening. You have the articulation of one joint surface with the articulation of another joint surface. And there are three different types of movements that can happen. A joint surface can slide along. It can literally roll, where you have different points of this surface articulating different points of this one. So it eventually rolls like a system until it gets to the other side. And that is called roll. Or there's a spin component. And this is the last one. I'm just going to do slide. And if you look in your chapters underneath slide, spin, and roll, it's chapter 8 in the textbook, you will see that by definition, slide is where one surface of a joint comes in contact with many different as it slides along. By the definition of roll, many joint surfaces of one come in contact with many joint surfaces of the other joint surface. So that's roll. And spin is simply where you have this one and this one spinning on each other. And so you have one joint surface in contact with one joint surface of this one, and you have a spinning occurring. So when you have movements occurring at a joint, you will either have slide, spin, or roll. We really get into looking at this at the knee, and so we will follow up with a video when we get to the knee. But you need to understand this is these arthrokinematic movements before we can actually really make great application into the knee, because the knee joint is the only joint that all of these arthrokinematic movements happen at. You either actually have spinning occurring at a joint, or you have sliding and rolling. These always occur together, and this always occurs separately. And so we'll talk about that in lab. But I wanted to introduce you to those arthrokinematic movements. But for the rest of this particular video, I want to talk about convex and concave law. When we looked at our joint classifications, we knew there were three major joint classifications. The one that this relates to is when we have our synovial joints. You should know the set structure of a synovial joint, and you should know that the mechanical classifications of these can either be a sliding or a gliding joint. It can be a ball and socket. It can be an ellipsoid. I hope I spelled that right. E-L. I think there might be two L's. I don't know. Anyways, ellipsoid. You can have a plane joint, which is a gliding and sliding. You can have a hinge, and you can have an ellipsoid, and this is condyloid. And you can have what's called a saddle. And I think those are all the classifications that we have, at least the ones that are important for this particular movement. Oh, the last one is pivot. Sorry. I knew I was missing one. A pivot joint. So we know that when the convex concave law states that when a convex surface, and we know that to be a surface that protrudes out. So you're inside the joint, and it's a surface that comes out like that. When it moves on a concave surface, and we know if we're inside a joint, this is a concave surface, so you're looking here inside the joint, that when a convex surface moves on a concave surface, the joint surface moves in the opposite direction of the body part. And let me just do that with you here. Now I want to just go back really quickly and just say convex-concave law was named, that is the law. It doesn't always infer that the convex is moving on the concave, because it can be the opposite. The concave can move on the convex. That's just the name of the law. So some students get confused on that, and they always assume because that's the law that the convex surface is always moving on the concave, but that's not true. But in a situation like this, when a convex is moving on a concave, it states that it moves in the opposite direction. So let's show this, and let's use the scapula for example. And here's our scapula. So this is our glenoid fossa. So we have the scapula right here. And we have our humerus. And I'm not very good at drawing, but this is our head of our humerus. And then we'll just do there. Okay, so that's our humerus moving. Here's the joint surface. And if we're doing abduction, so the arm is moving up, we know if we're sitting in here, we know that this surface right here is the convex surface because it protrudes into the joint, and this surface is the concave. So according to the convex-concave law, when a convex surface moves on a concave surface, the joint surface moves in the opposite direction to the body part. Now there's lots of videos that you can look at on YouTube that are available underneath the link section, but I want to show this to you. So if I were to draw this again below, and I'm going to try and do a similar drawing here, and I were to put the arm, let's just erase this part here, and I would put the arm up like this, okay, like that. We can see that the arm actually went up, but the joint surface went down. So it moves in the opposite direction of the body part. So now you have that same spot way down there, but the actual body part went up. And that's important for if you ever were to go on and practice in orthopedics, because it makes us know what part of the joint capsule we need to work on for mobility, because we need to know what direction the joint surfaces are going. So let's do the opposite, and let's look at a concave surface moving on a convex. Now let's look at the opposite. So let's look at when we have a concave surface moving on a convex. Okay, so let's take an example of that, and let's look at the elbow. So we know that the elbow is, we have our trochlea and our capitulum, which are convex, and then we have our ulnar notch and all those different things that are concave. So this is the elbow right here, and this is your humerus right there. So if I'm going up and down like that, we know that the concave, because we're sitting inside, this is the concavity, the concave surface is moving on the convex surface, the surface that protrudes in. So this is going to go up like that. So I'm going to draw another one right beside and try and mimic it here. And I'm going to draw it up like this. Not very good, but you get the picture. So you can see when a concave surface moves on a convex surface, the joint surface moves in the same direction as the body part. So let's look at the joint surface, and let's look, it's gone from here up to here. So it has moved up. The body part has gone up and it's gone up. So they're moving in the same direction, and that's the convex-concave law. In order to apply the convex-concave law, you actually need to know the different components of the joint and which part is convex and which part is concave. So as we work through each area from the shoulder on down to the lower extremities, we will be looking at each joint surface, and by the end you will be able to apply the convex-concave law at each joint surface.